Good morning and welcome to this session of Business Breeders, a live webinar series hosted by Goodman Group at Brock University. My name is Abdul Rahimi and it's my pleasure to serve as the Director of Goodman Group at Brock University. Goodman Group is a community-focused learning and development services provider that works to support professionals, businesses and entrepreneurs who pursue growth through professional development certificate programs, executive education, consulting services, and startup support. It is my pleasure to welcome the over 100 of you coming to this session today, taking a break with us, and also welcome all of you who are watching the recording at a later time, of course. This webinar series aims to provide 45-minute breathers filled with insightful discussions on timely, focused topics that are relevant to businesses and everyday lives. These sessions are led by award-winning Brock University faculty and leading industry experts. They all encourage thoughtful debates, keeping us all feeling connected as we get through this together. This webinar series is hosted on Wednesdays from 11 to 11:45. In a moment, I will hand the screen over to today's webinar lead, and that's Julia Deans, who will lead today's discussion. Julia will speak for approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll spend some time answering your questions. Some of you have already posed your questions at the time of registration. Thank you very much. You may also type your question live here using the chat feature, which is open now. And of course, you may tweet your questions and comments live at GSB Goodman Group. That is at GSB Goodman Group, all one word. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you today's webinar lead, and that's Julia Deans. Julia has practiced law in Toronto and Hong Kong and built QD Legal in Singapore before becoming a nonprofit CEO with Civic Action, Futurepreneur Canada, Canada Children's Literacy Foundation, and director of numerous nonprofit and business organizations. She's been named one of WAXN's top 100 most powerful women, a YWCA Toronto Woman of Distinction and Woman of Influence Canadian Diversity Champion, and received the Pearson Centre for Progressive Policy Leadership Award and the Goodman School of Business Distinguished Leader Award in 2018. Julia is also on the boards of Investco, George Brown College, the Canadian Post Community Foundation, and Jack.org, and also on the Sidewalk Toronto and Goodman School of Business's Advisory Council. Julia is the current CEO of Habitat for Humanity Canada. Julia, welcome to today's session. Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Abdul, and a warm good morning or good afternoon to you, everyone, wherever you are in the world watching this. It is a real pleasure to be spending time with the Goodman community. I was very honored to receive the school's Distinguished Business Leader Award in 2018 and to be invited to join Dean Goddess's Advisory Council the following year. From the many Goodman students and alumni I have met, I know that this is one of the most dynamic and stimulating business schools around, and I'm not surprised that Goodman is taking full advantage of virtual technology to connect students, alumni, and the community to each other and to new ideas. I'm here today to share with you how volunteering can boost your career, and I think just boost your life. It's an idea I believe very strongly in, and I hope that today I can convince you to believe the same thing. I'd like to focus on three topics today. The first is the secret benefits of volunteering. The second is what stops people from volunteering. And the third is how you can get started. For those of you who are already active volunteers, this will remind you why it is such a good thing to do and perhaps help you recruit more people to join you. Let's kick off with the secret benefits of volunteering. This first benefit may not be so secret. A TD Bank study showed that 90% of people volunteer because they want to make a positive contribution to the community. But what you may not know is how tremendous those community benefits are. Let's think first about what volunteers actually do. Take a moment to think about the volunteers you meet in the course of your day or your week. Even during the pandemic, Volunteers are doing a lot of the work that keeps our society and economy going. They staff our food banks. They collect essential supplies and toys for our shelters. They keep our library shelves stocked. They drive meals to people who are shut in, and they help them get to medical appointments. Any of you involved in sport will know that volunteers are at the heart of every sport in Canada. My husband is one example. He spent countless days supporting our daughter in competitive basketball, including training to become a coach so that he could better help her team. Volunteers also create cultural and art performances. And in COVID-19, they're trying to figure out how to make those things accessible to you via the internet without you having to pay for them. Volunteers are giving blood, and they're helping to make sure that the COVID treatments that are being tested have the people to help test them. And these will be vaccines that hopefully will help every one of us very soon in the future. And volunteers serve on the boards of charities and not-for-profits, working to keep those organizations going when all the things we've done in the past have been completely upended. At my organization, Habitat for Humanity Canada, where we partner with families to build their futures through affordable housing, COVID-19 forced us to stop building homes, to cancel Canadian service trips to help build homes in 70 countries around the world, and to close our 110 restores across the country, which fund our services for families. What you may not realize is how critical all these volunteer roles are. And so being a business audience, or many of you a business audience, I thought you'd be interested in knowing what the value is of unpaid work. Our government does not have a minister or department focused on the nonprofit and charitable sector. And I personally think that's a missed opportunity given the economic value of this sector. The Conference Board of Canada has estimated that in 2017 alone, volunteers added $2 billion to Canada's work effort. That's similar to all the people working in education. That was worth $55 billion, almost $56 billion, which is the equivalent of 2.6% of our GDP. And that's just the people who volunteer with formal groups or organizations. In addition to them, Stats Canada has estimated that in 2018, more than 22.7 million people, or almost 3/4 of Canadians over 15, devoted approximately 3.4 billion hours to informal volunteering. That's things like directly helping people outside your home or improving your community, but not with a group or organization. Interestingly, younger people, 22 and under, spend more time doing informal volunteering than volunteering with organizations. But even then, they still have the highest overall volunteer rate with formal organizations, over 50%. That being said, older volunteers still contribute many more hours than younger volunteers, usually because they have more available. But as you know right now, COVID-19 is hitting older people the hardest, and that's causing many of them to stay away from volunteering for the time being. This is really hard for charities like Habitat for Humanity that rely on volunteers. But like all of us, volunteers and charities are figuring out how to move forward. And on that note, I'd like to introduce you to John and Dick. I took this photo in February, just before the pandemic hit, at our Restore Distribution Center in Brampton. And that's where we collect and send donated new and used products to be sold at restores across the country. John and Dick are two very good friends in their 80s. John is a former pilot who worked in the aviation industry, and Dick is a retired optician who's also a world champion masters swimmer. John and Dick spend several days a week together in a workshop testing and repairing used items for sale. Their work means that we're able to earn an extra $250,000 a year to invest in affordable housing. When I went back to the Restore Distribution Center in September, all masked up, I was amazed to hear that John and Dick were back at it. They'd figured out how to keep themselves distanced to be safe, but also happy and productive. They can't live without doing volunteer work. So I hope I've got you convinced that by volunteering, you help to deliver tremendous value for our society and economy, a value that we really can't do without. So now let's turn to the value for you. As I mentioned earlier, there was a TD study on why people volunteer. In addition to giving back to their community, it found that close to 80% of people volunteer because they want to use their skills and experience. Spending time with friends and family who are already volunteering was also an important reason. And you can see that that is really important for John and Dick. But let's focus for a moment on the skills and experience. Volunteering is a great way to use the skills and experience and skills and knowledge you already have, but it's also a really good way to build knowledge and skills that you don't have. At Habitat for Humanity, for example, we help people who've never raised a hammer before to become proficient at doing things like drywalling. I have yet to meet someone who's volunteered at a Habitat build site who doesn't get a really big smile when they talk about the building skills they learned while building a home for a Habitat family. But it's not just technical skills that one can learn through volunteering. You can also learn business skills that will put you way ahead of others and serve you well for the rest of your life. Earlier, I mentioned my husband being a volunteer coach for our daughter's basketball team. He's a successful partner with a major consulting firm who's been leading and developing teams his whole career. But learning how to coach basketball and being an assistant coach to an exceptionally gifted head coach taught him skills about teaching and mentoring people that he would have never got at his big Bay Street firm, and which have led him to be much more valuable as a consulting partner. Not only that, the coaching experience inspired him to do more teaching. And so today, in addition to his consulting job, he's an adjunct business professor who's won multiple teaching awards, and he also serves on Dean Goddess's Toronto Advisory Council for the Goodman School. My husband's firm recognizes the value of his skills and experience from volunteering and the impact that this has had on both his consulting and his clients, and it fully supports his teaching. And I think you'll find that more and more workplaces are encouraging their employees to volunteer. And this is because in addition to helping their community, it's making employees much more effective in the workplace. Think about it. They better understand the community they're operating in and the organization's customers and clients, and they build community connections and a really good profile for their organization. So if you're a student, I want to underscore what this should be telling you, which is that employers recognize that people can get very important skills and experience through volunteering, and they value that. So if you're a student or really anyone else looking to build your career, this means that you can set yourself apart from other students or applicants by volunteering. I know this helped my son get his first job out of university at a major bank. He had volunteered as a writer for his university newspaper and then served on the board of directors for that newspaper. What this meant to employers was that he knew how to write and communicate. He knew how to meet deadlines. He could work with other people, and he'd been exposed to running a business. My volunteer work also helped me when I came back to the workforce after a few years away. During those years, I did a lot of volunteer work at my kids' school. I was also organizing very large-scale events and doing lots of fundraising. So when I started to look for my next paid job, I decided to look for a nonprofit leadership role. And my skills as a lawyer and an entrepreneur were very helpful, but it was my proven ability to create large-scale events and engage volunteers and motivate them to do things and give money that got me the job. Even though my career has become all about leading large not-for-profits, I continue to volunteer because that helps me build my skills and experience. I've served on the boards of a number of organizations, as Abdul mentioned, including George Brown College and Jack.org and the Canada Post Community Foundation. And I also serve on a private board of Investico, which is a private company that invests in sustainable food businesses. So through all of these, I've been able to learn a lot about managing an organization and the different types of operations and governance. And that's helped me become a better employee and a better CEO. It's also helped me build a very large network and access to career opportunities. And this is the third secret benefit of volunteering I'd like to discuss. The TD study I've mentioned before found that 22% of people volunteer to help them find a job. But I'm going to suggest that for people starting to build their careers, volunteering can be a really big help. And that's because it helps you to learn how to work in an organization and build your network. Getting a job in business in particular can be very hard for a student or recent graduate. You haven't had time to get a lot of work experience, and the experience that you have had may not be directly transferable to a business setting. For newcomers, the challenge can be a lot worse. Even if you have work experience, it may not be fully recognized because employers aren't familiar with your home country or the organization you worked for. Too often, immigrants miss out on opportunities because employers don't fully recognize their non-Canadian work experience. This is something I think is a huge shame, and I've worked hard to help change, but I'm sorry to say that it is still an issue. But one of the things that any of us can do to counter concern about lacking relevant work experience is to get some by volunteering. As an employer who has hired many new graduates, I can tell you that I always look to see what kind of volunteering a person has done. It tells me a lot about their work ethic, their interpersonal skills, their reliability, their commitment, and their ability to communicate and work with other people. Even better is if they've done volunteer roles in which they've learned skills that are directly relevant to our work, things like writing, fundraising, event planning, research and analysis, or marketing. As well as making it easier for you to sell yourself to employers, volunteering can also help you build the network you need to help find and get jobs. I know that Goodman students have the benefit of a terrific careers office where they can help you research potential jobs and connect you with people and opportunities and organizations. All of these are super valuable connections, and you should use every chance you have to make the most of them. But once you leave school, and even when you're still a student, there's a whole other world of opportunities that will come to you because of your networks, the people you know. And outside of your fellow students, if you're a student, you may not have very big networks, especially in the business world. This will be especially true for people who are new to Canada, who haven't had the advantage of a lifetime of Canadian connections through friends and family. But volunteering gives you a way to build those connections, to build them with people you don't already know, or to strengthen connections with people you do know. We all know how easy it is to build relationships through shared experience. And whether you're serving meals to the homeless, coaching a soccer team, tutoring a student, helping to organize an event, or serving on a board, you're doing it with other people, and you're giving them a chance to get to know you, to see your talents, and to want to help you. People you volunteer with can help you learn about jobs. They'll think about you for jobs they hear about, and they can give you letters of reference or recommendations when you may need them. You might even turn your volunteer role into a paid position. When I was CEO of Civic Action, which is a city building organization in Toronto, we regularly had interns come to work on our team, and they would research major urban issues and help us to put on big, large-scale summits on these issues. We almost always hired these interns on as permanent staff when they finished school or in contract roles. And I have stayed in touch with every single one of them and been a mentor and a reference for them as they built their careers. So at this point, I'm hoping you're also now convinced of the benefits to both your career and your community of volunteering. So the really big question is, what stops people from volunteering? Once people start volunteering, like John and Dick, they see how enjoyable and meaningful it is, and they generally don't stop. but it can take a while to get started. And I'm going to share with you the 3 reasons that most people have for not getting started. The first is they don't have time. They, if you're anybody right now, you have a busy life, and if you're a student, your job is never done. There is always another article to read. There's always another paper to be perfected or an exam to be studied for. It's like that in the workplace too. I never have enough time to talk with my staff the way I would like to read all my emails, to write articles, or to call people. But those aren't the only things that are important to me or to the future of my family and my community. Volunteering gives me a needed break. It lets me do something for someone else, and it helps me to learn new skills and meet new people. It's worth noting that studies have shown that volunteering has a positive impact on reducing depression and improving life satisfaction and well-being. In this horrible time of COVID, giving ourselves a pick-me-up is really, really important. And it's not perhaps surprising that Statistics Canada has reported on more people stepping up to assist others. Things like picking up and dropping off groceries and other supplies in somebody's community, cooking meals, sewing masks, sharing information, and providing emotional support on online social media platforms. These are not things that will demand days and days or hours and hours of your time. You can volunteer for 1 hour a week or 10. It's up to you, but it will be time well invested in yourself and in the people around you. I think the second people don't volunteer is thinking they don't have valuable skills to offer. We've talked already about the ways in which one can volunteer, and it's clear that they don't all require a high level of skill. Organizations like Habitat for Humanity and most others will give volunteers on-the-job training. But beyond that, I think a lot of people underestimate the value of the skills they have. And I would bet, for example, that most people on this call know how to read. That means that you can help a non-reader learn to read or read to people who maybe have vision issues or otherwise can't read for themselves. I would also bet that most people on this webinar know how to have a meaningful conversation with another person. This means that you can easily train to be a volunteer answering calls for the kids' help phone or another crisis line. Let's focus for a moment on the skills that business students have. I've done a lot of work with an organization called the Mentoring Partnership, which matches mentors with skilled immigrants looking to get their first Canadian work experience. I'll never forget meeting a young management consultant at BCG who was mentoring an older fellow who'd come to Canada, and he'd been a consulting partner in his home country. I don't mean that he was old. He was just a lot older than she was. She was in her early 20s. But she turned out to be the ideal mentor for him, because the thing he most needed was help getting his CV in order. She was a recent graduate of a business school. She knew exactly how to help him, because sure enough, she knew how to do a CV. She knew how to prepare for interviews. She knew how to talk research, consulting roles, etc. And with her coaching, this fellow ended up in a consulting firm several levels above her, but her support was invaluable. And she was a recent business school grad. On the flip side, though, I do want to acknowledge that some people get frustrated when their skills aren't fully used when they volunteer. And I've had this experience myself. A long time ago, before I went back to work, I was volunteering with Doctors Without Borders and thinking, oh, they're going to want to make full advantage of my legal skills and my international experience. But instead, they asked me to file. And at the time, I remember thinking, well, this is a bit insulting. But what I know now, having worked in not-for-profits, is that it actually takes people to make good use of volunteers. And when an organization has volunteers come, they're going to use them for the work that they most need done. I've also realized that Doctors Without Borders didn't know me from a hole in the ground. So they needed some time to see me volunteering, to test my skills and my attitude and my commitment before they gave me more substantial work. And you can imagine if I'd been given some sort of legal project and then I decided not to come back after 2 weeks, they would be further behind and have invested all that time in a wasted effort. So I respect that. And I'd ask you, if you are volunteering, to keep in mind that it takes capacity to use volunteers. The final reason that people don't volunteer is because they don't know how to get started. So I'd like to use the final part of my presentation to talk about that. I'd like to suggest 4 fairly easy steps that you can take to start volunteering. The first is to pick an area of interest. If you're going to volunteer your time, it should be on something that matters to you. So have a look at what's out there. What would really excite you? Is it working in the media? Is it animal welfare, climate change, education, or helping people with disabilities or living in poverty? Whatever it is, you will be happier and more effective if you're volunteering to work on something that you truly care about. Step 2 is to consider what you have to offer. And part of this is what time you have available. Be realistic about that, and perhaps start with a smaller commitment, an hour a week, 2 hours a week, that you know you can make while you get started. The other part is to consider what skills you have to offer, or perhaps the skills you want to develop as a volunteer. Whether you do something that's building on what you do the rest of your time, or do something completely different, you're going to gain experiences and skills and connections from it. So some people will want to work in sports because it's very different from their day job. Other people will say, I know I'm an accountant and I have a lot of skills that would help a charity or not-for-profit do more effective work. I'm going to use that. It's up to you. Either one of them is needed. Once you have a good sense of the areas that interest you and what you're able to offer, you can move to step 3 and research and contact people. You could get started even just as an informal volunteer and let people know in your neighborhood or in your family and friends that you're available to help people. Or you can start researching organizations where you might formally volunteer. A really good place to start is the volunteers.ca website, volunteers.ca. That's our national umbrella organization for volunteering. And it's got great resources on how to volunteer and how to connect with volunteer centers and opportunities near you. And right now that includes a lot of virtual roles. But also you can just reach out to organizations that you're interested in that work in areas that you like. And most websites will have a volunteer contact. But it's always fantastic to hear from people saying, I like the work that you do. I've got some time available. What can I do to help? But step 4 is not to give up. You may find that the organization of your dreams is not able to accommodate you as a volunteer. And that's probably because I said before, they lack capacity to make good use of you. Or you may start volunteering in a role that turns out to be not quite right for you. That happens, and organizations will always respect your decision as long as you're gracious about it and give them notice so that you're not continuing, so that they can plan for that. But don't let this turn you off volunteering. Learn from the experience and find another role that will suit you better. Now it's time to turn things over to you for any questions or comments you may have. I'd really love to hear what people are thinking about volunteering and any tips you have that you may want to share with others. So you can put a note in the chat if you'd like to say something. But while you do think about that, let me share just one last photo with you. This is me. I'm with the bright blue shirt and the ginormous construction boots on the right. They are not my size, but they're what they had available. And I'm doing a women's build in Kingston. And this is where a group of women volunteers come together to work on a home. In this case, it was for a single mom who'd not had a proper or affordable place to live with her 3 children. So in addition to meeting everybody on the build, I met the woman who was going to move into the house with her 3 kids. And she was so excited that she was finally going to have a closet of her own and be able to plant bulbs in the garden that she would be able to see come up year after year. Pretty much all the women in this photo are volunteers, and they range from people serving in the military to ministers in the local church. The woman next to me was a professional clown. But every single one of them was learning to build. They were enjoying the company of others, and they were knowing that they were doing something that was going to build a family and that family's future in their community. So I really hope that you will see yourself in a picture like this sometime soon. And certainly at Habitat for Humanity, we're always welcoming volunteers, but anything that lights you up, I hope that that's something that you'll consider. So I'm going to stop sharing my tab and see if we can have a bit of a conversation for a few minutes. There we go.
Julia, thank you very much for that. Very insightful. I've got a few questions that I might like to pose to you as I look to my screen on my left to read these questions as they have come in. Okay, during COVID, what are some of the best or innovative ways that you've heard of volunteering?
Well, I do think that the crisis lines are one that comes immediately to mind, and we know about the mental health issues that are afflicting a lot of people, particularly young people. And I'm thinking, if I'm a Goodman student and I'm feeling relatively comfortable and that I have time and energy to put to volunteering, I could be somebody who would be really good to talk to for another student who might not be having such a good experience, or for a younger student in high school who's saying, where is all this leading to? So I think the crisis lines are a really obvious place to start. I think we also are worried about people who may not have food and access to food. So volunteering for a food bank or for a Meals on Wheels that is going to make sure that people who are not able to go out for themselves get food is tremendous. At our organization, we have volunteers continuing to work in our restores, which helps to fund building, and we have some volunteers in our build sites. But all of us in the charitable world are making sure that people are really, really safe. And so I think you can count on that with any organization that you're talking to.
Great, thank you for that. How does volunteering influence your ability to secure a position or a job?
Well, I had, through my volunteering, I've learned how you motivate people to do things without paying them. And that is a really big skill, because you have to appeal to something beyond money. And in the charitable world, we're doing that all the time to get companies or other organizations to give us money, to get volunteers to come and help on our build sites. You have to learn how to motivate people. And at one point, I was looking for a role, and I was having conversations with very senior people at one bank. And one person looked at me and he said, "Well, you've managed 18 people, and I managed 30,000. What makes you think you could come and do things here?" And I was able to say, "Well, sir, when you want to do a big transaction and get a big law firm to help you, you pay them a lot of money and you get a good job. When I want to do something interesting that requires legal skills, I get them to do it for free and I get the same quality of work." And he just paused and he said, "Oh, I understand." And he realized how important that was. And to his credit, he ended up joining the organization that I had been with, which was really great. But it gives you this whole other skill set to motivate people. And I can guarantee you, motivating people just by money is not enough, especially right now in COVID. And I think everybody on this call knows how this is a hard time. You have to have people around you because they believe in what you're doing. They want to do it with you. And it's not just for the money.
Here's another question about motivating folks of different age groups. What are some of the strategies that you might have utilized for motivating those who are younger, but also those who may be at a different age group as well?
Yeah, well, I think most people want to volunteer because they want to spend time with other people. They may be quiet, they may not want to do it face to face, but they want to be involved in other people. So making places for them to be part of a group and share experiences and fun things and knowledge is really big. On the for younger people, um, you know you have lots of potential and there's lots of things you can do, and often you just need a vehicle or a platform to help you do that. And
Mhm.
so when I'm working with younger people, it's helping them think about what are the skills that they want to bring out, and can I give them a platform and some guidance to bring those along. So they don't want to be just given a piece of paper or a box and say shuffle this. They want to understand why they're doing it, how does it fit into things, can you give them some learning along the way, and informal mentoring and coaching. So I think that combination of experience, camaraderie, and some learning and development are usually what lights younger people up, and the ability to come back to them and show them what the difference is that they've made. That matters a lot.
Great, thank you. How do you find volunteers to come and work for organizations like Habitat for Humanities?
Well, I think we're pretty lucky at Habitat for Humanity because it's one of the best recognized names of a charity in the world. So people know the organization, they trust it, they know that we're associated with affordable housing everywhere in the world. So that helps a lot. But it's a lot to do with our the people who work for our organization, who go out and talk to community groups, who work with our existing volunteers to help them bring more people along by telling their stories. And storytelling is always really, really critical to the experience of volunteers and to attracting volunteers and donors and staff. So we are out there telling our stories, and we're out there making places for them to come and do something that'll be fun.
If you're new to volunteering, are there particular approaches that you could be taking to make that more approachable for that individual, or the type of volunteer? Where should they start?
Yeah, well, I'd come back to the 4 steps, and I really, really do think it has to be something that matters to you. So, speaking personally, I would not be great working in the Humane Society. It's not my thing. I'll admit it. I'm not. I'm just that wouldn't be my thing. I need to be working with people and helping them to achieve their potential. That really lights me up. So you really need to find the thing that matters to you. You need to be honest with yourself about what you have to offer and what you're going to feel comfortable doing. And so that you have that conversation with the organization and say, what are the kinds of volunteers you use? And does that sound appealing to you? And if it doesn't, there's no harm in saying, oh, thanks, that's great. I really appreciate your time, and moving on to the next organization until you find the thing that matters to you. And I think the other thing I'd say is just to go with the flow a little bit. And as people get to know you and trust you, and you show an interest in things, you'll be able to evolve your volunteer role into whatever it is you want to be doing with that organization. And there's so many smart people on this call, they probably will go into an organization and say, I'm happy to do this, but do you know that you could have a whole other social media platform, or you could redesign your materials, or you could be talking to all these other groups as part of your outreach. You might well create a new job for yourself or a new volunteer role for yourself, but you're helping that organization hugely.
Great. Yeah. I think you said knowing yourself, right? That's an important trait in there. Knowing what's going to work for you and where your interest lies. Yeah. So this could be a great testing ground for that purposes as well.
Exactly. And some people, go and work in hospitals, and people who think they're going to be doctors and
Right.
realize that they can't stand being around sick people. That's pretty good to know before you go and invest all your time in med school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great advice there. Do you think it's beneficial for, especially those who are younger and new to volunteering, perhaps to volunteer in one place, or spend more time in multiple places, acquiring or exposing themselves to multiple opportunities that way?
I think it probably depends on the person. And are you looking to make an investment and really get to know that organization and build your volunteer career there? What we know from studies is that young people are doing more episodic volunteering. So they prefer to do something that's a one-off, short-term. And that's probably because they do want to find the next experience and see something different. Either one is perfectly acceptable. It really depends on what your level of motivation is or interest. And I think the big thing is to be with an organization where you're on the same page, because it can be really disruptive if somebody comes and then just suddenly disappears. But if you've come saying, I'm here for a day, I'm here for a month, everybody's on the same page.
Mm. How do you deal with expectation of certain volunteers as a volunteer organization that may feel certain positions are beneath their skill sets? I think you addressed this a little bit in your
I did. And I hope it came across that I'm still kind of embarrassed about that experience, but I just didn't know, and most of us wouldn't know. I think it's being honest with people, and as organizations, we should say, we love that you're a volunteer. We love that you're a Goodman graduate and you're working in finance and you're all these things. This is the role that we have to be done right now. Come and join us. It'll help you get to know our organization. And then maybe you build your career and join our board of directors. That would be great. Equally, if you're the volunteer, to say, I'm really looking for something where I can use my hard skills. And they hopefully, the charity would say, we can accommodate that or we can't, so that you have that conversation. But don't be shy to have it.
Mm-hmm. As a volunteer, someone that was looking to start out volunteering, perhaps graduating out of school, and you may have a certain career trajectory in mind, or organization or industry in mind, what would your advice be to those individuals that wanting to pursue that? How should they approach that organization or individuals within that industry?
Well, I often say Canada is a country of networks, but nobody jealously guards them. So there are very few people who will not take a call or respond to an email from anybody. And that goes from an industry CEO to a charity leader to anybody. So I always tell people, find the organization or the area that interests you. Pick people who are doing what you would like to do ultimately, and write to them and contact them and say, I really admire the work you do. I love your career. I'd love to see myself there at some point. Will you spend some time with me telling me what you see in this world, and what are some ways I could start getting exposure, whether it's volunteering or otherwise? No one is going to say no to that. And if they do, they're not a good person, and just leave them behind. But it is an amazing way to learn about things and to start getting some exposure. 100%.
Excellent. Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much for the time here and for taking time out of your busy schedule, for coming to speak to our community members here and the community of practitioners.
Well, it is such a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I wish everybody well. And I hope that I've twisted your arms and got you thinking about volunteering. I'd love to see more people in the sector. And now, may I turn things over to your remaining slides? Would that be helpful?
Please, yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Speaking of volunteering, and I'm along with a few of our colleagues are working towards our Movember, an opportunity to raise awareness around men's health and raising funds there. If I can do a shameless plug here for the Goodman team, we have over tripled our raised triple of our target in terms of what we had accomplished already, and that speaks to the individuals that are in the team, but also the individuals that have contributed to the team. So that is Team Goodman, and the link for that is on our website as well. And thank you for everyone who has so far contributed. Still a few more days left until December 1, when all of these facial hairs will be coming down from the various individuals. And there are some posts on our website as well from every member of the team, which is fantastic. And Julia, if you might share your screen, please, if I may ask you to do that at this point.
Okay, it's I see I came out of it. I apologize.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As I turn our attention to next week's and the next sessions. So the next session of this Business Breeders session will be December 9th, and that will be with Dr. Aaron Ora, who will be speaking in the area of cybersecurity. And this week you would have seen a news release speaking and announcing Goodman's relationship and partnership with the Supply Chain Management Institution of Canada, the Ontario chapter, which is a fantastic partnership and opportunity both for our students, but also for those in the community. And we will be having a cybersecurity webinar and seminar coming up in the new year. That is January 26th and 27th. Between 1 and 4 each day. Still allows you to go through your day's work in the morning and join these sessions in the afternoon. Would encourage as many of you as possible to register for these sessions. The details of that are on your screen and also on our website. So that's a recent partnership between the Goodman School and the Supply Chain Association of Canada. And of course, next week is joining us one of our distinguished faculty members from Brock University speaking about that particular domain as well. So that's December 9th at 11 to 11:45. I hope many of you can join us then. Until then, stay safe.